which is just the opposite of what the Spirit wants. And the Spirit gives us desires that are opposite of what the sinful nature desires. These two forces are constantly fighting each other, so you're not free to carry out your own good intentions.
Hi, my name is David. It was the reign of Saul, and I was in the fields doing my daily job of watching the sheep. It was in the middle of the day when my father called me to bring roasted grains and 10 loaves of bread to my brother who were in battle. My father also told me to bring cheese to their captain as well. I left as soon as I could because I knew it was going to be a long journey to the Israelite camp. When I was on the journey with another shepherd that my father had sent with me, we ran into a lot of dangers such as snakes. But God kept us safe and we kept on going. When it started to become night, the other shepherd and I set up camp. I wired and fed the camels so they could finish the long journey. I woke up just before sunrise, and after taking down the camp, we finished our journey. I arrived at the Israel camp just as soon as they were leaving for battle. I could tell because of their chants and war cries. I then gave the food to the supply keeper and headed out to battle to see how my brothers were doing so I could report back to my father. When I got to the battle line and asked how things had been, I saw the biggest guy I've ever seen. He looked like a giant. That's when I heard his taunt about someone coming into battle and fight him. After the whole Israel camp ran away in fear, that's when the whole Israel camp ran away in fear. When I caught up to a few of the soldiers, I asked, who was this guy? And they said his name was Goliath, the Philistine army champion. They also said that King Saul would give the hand of one of his daughters, and the killer his family would never have to pay taxes again, which would be really awesome for that family. When I was trying to learn more about Goliath and the reward, my oldest brother, Elibeth, came to me and angrily told me what I was doing there and that I should just go back home and watch the sheep. After we argued for a while, he finally let me take my question to King Saul. I told King Saul that Goliath should never taunt or say what he said to the Israelite armies. And when Saul heard my thing, he was like, don't be ridiculous. You're only a boy, and he's a grown man looking like a giant. But I said, I fought off lions and bears with God's help to protect my sheep, and that Goliath is nothing compared to God, and that he should never talk to the army of the living God like he did. When Saul heard what I had to say, he agreed to let me fight, but first he wanted me to try on some of his armor so I could protect myself. But when I put it on, it was huge, and I was used to not having any armor when I fought off lions and bears with God's help. When Saul was talking about how I was going to get killed if I didn't wear the armor, I saw some smooth stones in the creek that was running through the camp. I found 5 perfect ones and put them in a little bag that I carried because I had a plan. When I went into the battlefield, armed with only a shepherd's staff and a sling, Goliath was taunting me with insults like, am I a dog and you bring me a stick? Or, I will kill you and feed your body to the birds and wild animals. When he was done, I replied to him with, you come with me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. Today, the Lord will conquer you, and I'll kill you and cut off your head, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. When I was done, I started running to him while getting out a stone out of my bag. I put it in my sling, and when I was close enough, hurled it at him. It hit him square right in the forehead with so much force, it knocked him out, and the giant fell and hit the ground with a boom. I then took his sword and cut off his head. When the Philistines had seen that their champion was dead, they fled, and the whole army of the living God went after them and defeated the Philistine army.
And the parts that you're not a part of go off better than you thought. So I'm changing up a few things. So bear with me if I seem a little bit lost. Where is Christian? Christian, can you hear me? Come here. Sorry, guys. We are sure of one thing. The heat works. Works well. It is now. Excellent. Sorry. I think it's important because, and Arlene, where does she go? Okay. You know, illness and sickness can be a big giant. When you look at these two, there are accounts that Goliath was 6'9", 9'9", and over 10 feet tall. Obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know, Ron, were you there by chance? Not quite. Just right after that battle, right? So I think it's important. See, David was a standard size 15-year-old. And he's walking up against a non-standard size adult. Not any adult, but the absolute champion of the Philistine army. This man was born and bred to kill. When you read the story in the New Living Translation, you see that his armor weighed as much as I do. And I'm not going to tell you how much it is, but I can tell you that's a lot. He carried that around on top of himself. And I think it's important because sometimes I think we think our giants are so big that we just can't overcome them. And when you look at this, can you imagine David walking up against Goliath with such a physical stature variance? Thanks, guys. Thank you, Christian. Awesome job. I don't know about you, but every day I get to face my giants. Every day I get to stare down the things that hold me back. Sometimes that's self-doubt. Sometimes it's school shootings. You know, in this particular world today, whether you are on the side of one or the side of the other, there's only one truth that remains. We have a problem. When you face the issues of pornography, sexual immorality, when you're faced with people at school treating you differently, We all go at that head on. So, to give you a little background, for all my airsofters out there, is it better to fight uphill or fight downhill? Downhill. Is that what you said? If you want to be above your enemy, right? So that you have the vantage point. Remember, we went to Hoosier's Knob just last week, and they had the bulwarks built in, right? And they were up on top of the hill, and it made it very difficult for the southern armies to take that knob. The Philistines had come up to the plains just before the valley. Saul and his army came down off the mountain and stopped. They're facing each other with only a valley between them. Neither wanting to make an advancement because of what? They would have to go down and fight uphill. Now, it's not uncommon, from what I understand, in those times, that instead of actually engaging two armies, they would send out their absolute best. And the Philistines sent out their absolute best. And as he is down there, like we tend to do, he's hurling insults. You know, whenever you want to incite someone, or Satan gets in your head, we don't have to worry about the text. That's the whole part where I jumped a whole different direction. He was taunting them and taunting their God. And nobody had the guts to fight this guy. That's how our giants tend to do that, the giants in our head. We want to do something, or we're afraid of something, or we feel something, and they tell us we're not good enough. They tell us that we have sinned before. We're not worthy of God. We're not worthy of what He has given us. We're not worthy, so why don't you just sit down and shut up? See, we don't always put on the right armor. You have David, just a shepherd boy. He doesn't know any better. Just doing what his dad told him to do. If you learn one thing from your story of David, that's the part I want you to know. Do what your dad tells you to do. He's talking to the soldiers, and he's hearing these taunts, and he doesn't understand. You see, he runs on a different wavelength. He doesn't understand why. Why are we allowing this guy to make fun of our God? And then you got family. Family who steps up and says, why are you here? Just shoo. Go along. Go back to your sheep. That's what you're good at. The people around us, sometimes the people we think that are going to be our friends, our family, those who care about us, sometimes are our own giant. Breeding and seeding issues of self-doubt in our hearts. Not supportive. Not willing to step up and say, I'm there with you. You got this. But rather tear you down. But again, David is not held back. See a little squabble, as brothers do, right? Why are you saying this to me? I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I don't know about you guys, but I can actually hear this daily in my own household. Usually around bedtime, for whatever reason, they're downstairs, you're in bed, comfortable, and you got to get back up and tell them, go back to bed. Then they tell him, whoever defeats this giant gets one of Saul's daughters. No taxes. How nice is that? Like you said, I'm surprised that you didn't talk about the daughter. You just really talked about the taxes. But as we know, guys, And I get it. You're going to kind of bow your head and you're going to shy away. But be honest. Throw a good-looking girl in there, we'll do some really dumb things, won't we? We get 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Quote a guy I know called Travis Tritt, sorry. But see, David doesn't do this for glory. He's still upset that this guy is making fun of his God. Can't understand why on earth anybody doesn't step up. So he says, I'm going to. Goes to talk to Saul. So now we got our leaders telling us we're inadequate. Not only are they telling me inadequate, when they finally acquiesce, then they want to put their opinions on you. This is how you do it. Because see, David isn't really that unaware of how to do this. He's done this before. How many of you have ever seen a bear? I know one person in the audience has seen a bear, up close and personal. I've smelled them. They're not particularly smelly. Their odoriferous nature is not pleasant. How many of you have seen a lion? Not in a cage. Up close and personal. I have not, other than in a cage, but I'm guessing that lions and bears, oh my, don't compare to the biggest giant you can find. See, their primal nature is such that they don't kill for fun. They don't kill for any other reason than to eat and to protect themselves. And when you institute that into anything and put them in a dangerous situation, you find a whole different kind of being. And David already faced those. In his mind, there is nothing he can't face. Do you think it's because he's that good? Or because he still has that armor on? He knows where he gets his strength. He's very clear on that. But Saul's trying to put on a different kind of armor and telling him to do it differently. And if you're any kind of whatever you do in life, you realize you should stick to what you know. And he knew the sling. Now, Malcolm Gladwell, for those who maybe have heard his story, he did a TED Talk about this story. And it was kind of interesting, and it's based in science, which I always like. And he talks about how there are 3 different types of military forces, actually, ironically, still today. You have your foot soldiers, your artillery, and for us, we have, of course, our Air Force and our air attack. See, Goliath was a foot soldier. He had armor, javelin, spear, sword. He was very well aware and very suited for hand-to-hand combat. Well, now, they had no Tomahawk missiles back then. Theirs were pebble missiles. And they would use lead ball, if they had it, or some type of a metal ball. They would use stones. And these guys that were either archers or slingers were really good at their job. Believed that a slinger could accurately hit something about 200 yards away. It's a long way. Even if you look at it 200 feet, that's still a long way. Now, I'm not quite sure that his math was quite right, but he looked at the mass of the object, he looked at the speed of which one could generate using a sling, and said it was the equivalent of a .45 caliber handgun. I think that's stretching a little bit, but apart from that, we know that a rock hurled by hand can do some damage. Certainly one slung in a sling can do a little more damage. He also then goes to somewhat discredit Goliath. Right, wrong, or otherwise. How many wrestling fans out there? Now, Mr. Batten, I know back in your day you're probably a big Wrestler Mania fan, weren't you? So, for those that know Andre the Giant, yeah? Near at, or at, I think he was right at about 7 feet tall. So now, in reality, holy Moses, that scared me. Let me collect myself. Okay, you just want to make sure everybody's going good. I appreciate that. David looked a little saggy-eyed. I wasn't quite sure. He woke up from my WrestleMania comment, though. Goliath still had about 2 foot 9 inches on Andre the Giant. And Andre was a giant. Acromegaly is secondary to a pituitary tumor. Causes the human growth hormone not to be regulated. And so they just keep growing. Matter of fact, even keep growing until they die. Okay? Brought up that even maybe Abraham Lincoln had a milder, possibly, form of it. The tallest man in the world, and I can't remember his name. That is in recorded history, I guess you'd say. Also suffered from acromegaly. Because it sits in the pituitary tumor, which is somewhat right between your eyes, the optic nerves are back there too. And so Malcolm Gladwell's perspective is that Goliath was led to the field, which it does say that he was, by an attendant, but that was because he couldn't see, or he had double vision. So when David chooses to go just his sling and his shepherd's staff, that he says, you come to me at me with sticks. Okay. All that could be fine and good. But this guy was not just imposing in his physical stature. He, in fact, was their champion, which meant that he's done this before. So whether you ascribe to Malcolm Gladwell's kind of perspective on, and like I said, minimizing Goliath, no matter how you slice or dice it, this is one big dude. And he's one powerful dude. And he does a lot of damage. It says that David didn't just walk down. He ran. Not only did he just run, he runs quickly. This kid has no fear. Doesn't appear to have 1 ounce of it. And he's walking into the most dangerous situation of that day, when trained soldiers run in fear. We look at ourselves, we look at our lives, we all have our issues. See, other people might choose to minimize those issues for you. Listen to someone give a reflection. It's a lady, actually played it over the phone. It was a lady who had cancer. And the top 10 things not to say to me when you see me. They don't want you to say, well, it could be worse. They don't want you to say, well, I have a friend who has that too. They survived. We believe in a health message, but I'm pretty positive that they don't want to hear the latest carrot juice or herbal treatments to cure their cancer. They don't want to know what your own research is on how to cure their cancer. They want to just hear that you care for them and to ask them, how can I support you? No matter what your giants are, you need to face them head on. David, as we know in the story, ran to his opponent. His opponent hurled insults at him and his God again. And like men do, they get a little bit of a verbal sparring going on. Except the verbal sparring that comes from David is that you may think you're going to tear me apart and feed me to the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, but my God is going to do that to you and worse. Just watch. Gets his stone out, puts it in his sling, and he puts the giant down. I implore upon you today that no matter what giant you're facing, that all the things in this world do not compare to the armor of God. He is very clear. You see this over and over again throughout the Bible, through possibly your own lives, that when you put on the armor of God, nothing is impossible. That when you put on the armor of God, giants fall all around you. I would ask, as I close, that you would find one of the young people that were up here today. You can include Mark too, because he's pretty young. But you know, they did this for part of their Pathfinder service. I am immensely proud of all of them. Because the giant that they faced today was a stand up here. And for some of them, they had never done that before. And they did an amazing job. Listening to the music, I was moved. Listening to Forrest pray up front, I was moved. Listening to Lewis, who I know probably needs to go shower again because he sweats so much, being up front, did more than I could ever have asked him to do. Please find them and congratulate him. Some of you guys are comfortable up front, and some of you I've never seen up front have that same fear that they have, and they conquered their fear. Hopefully they conquered their fear by putting on the armor of God. And I would ask that as you fight your giants, or when you see the people around you fighting theirs, that not only do you help them get clothed in the armor of God, but you put it on for yourselves as well. Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day, Lord. You know, we so many times want to go fight our giants by ourselves. We think we have the way, someone else thinks they have the way, whatever that may be. There are no giants too big, no giants too small. And we know that you are standing right beside us, handing us your armor. And when we can't fight on our own, we know, Lord, that you step in front of us and will take the battle on yourself. And there is nothing that can defeat you. Lord, we'd ask that you be with the people in this room. We would ask that you please be with Arlene's sister. Whatever it may take, Lord, help someone have what is needed. All of it belongs to you. I belong to you. This congregation belongs to you. And all that we do should be to honor you. In your name I pray. Amen.